Can popular artists who aim to reach a mass audience create works that demand audiences think beyond the present? Can commercial artists make avant-garde art?
What do you think you're doing anyway, huh?
Over 30 years ago, the artist Mark America declared it was possible. He wrote the Avant Pop Manifesto, and he declared that a new artistic movement had arrived. He wrote, "Now that postmodernism is dead, and we're in the process of finally burying it, something else is starting to take hold in the cultural imagination. We call this new phenomenon Avant Pop." But the Avant Pop movement was hardly new in 1992. In the 1960s, the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, Joe Meek, the Velvet Underground, and even the Beatles were pioneers of Avant Pop, the movement that Mark America claimed was aiming to break free from the chains of commercial standardization and embrace intuitive intelligence and nonlinear thinking. Speaking of nonlinear, one of the artists I would count amongst the early pioneers of the Avant Pop just passed away at the age of 86.
A lot of times people would think that because let me start this way. Both Dick and I made a career. We had a good career, and it was based on I was inarticulate, and there's times when you're going through life that you'd like to be articulate, when you'd like to say something clear, and this isn't one of those times.
Including Tommy Smothers of the Smothers Brothers as an avant-pop artist might be counterintuitive, but while he was perhaps a conventional folk musician, he was hardly a conventional thinker or speaker. In this video, I'm going to argue that he and his brother Dick should both be counted as experimental and subversive artists. Hello, Sublation Media viewers, it's me again, Douglas Lane, and this video is going to explore the potential in the old avant-pop with the hope that we might still recover the progressive aspects of mass culture and the avant-garde both, or at least recover the memory of what the avant-garde was and what its recovery might mean. And along the way, I'll make the case that the clean-cut and inoffensive Smothers Brothers should be included in the avant-garde.
Hey, what's happening in this world where there's things that seem so wrong and so bad, and only through probably the most fantastic thing in the world is people's voices singing. For in a world that is torn asunder, only the sound of people's voices joined in song bring its warmth of freedom and friendship to all of us. So I know a lot of you have come here amongst yourself as strangers. Friends, let's join in. We're going to have... Was there something else?
No, you could. That's all right.
Here we go.
Recently, the former president of the Marxist group, the Platypus Affiliated Society, explained what avant-garde art is and what it aimed at. Chris Catrone interpreted Gustave Courbet's 1855 painting, The Painter's Studio, a real allegory summing up 7 years of my artistic and moral life. And in so doing, Catrone explained the ambition of the avant-garde in its entirety. The aim is to overcome the separation between the ambition and inner world of man and the reality of the natural world.
Let's look at that one. That's a good transition, actually. So this is the painter in his studio, and you'll see that Baudelaire is on the right-hand side. And
oh yeah, there he is with his book.
Yep. And this is a huge painting, by the way. I saw it in Paris when I went there in 2019. And it's so large that the figures are almost life-size.
Huh.
It's a gigantic painting. And so Michael Fried writes about this painting in particular about how, so Courbet did self-portraiture. That's the genre that he started out with. And then he continued to do some self-portraiture, but he moved away from self-portraiture. But what Fried said is that actually all of Courbet's paintings are self-portraiture. including landscapes and including nudes, including women who are nudes. That's all self-portraiture, including the most kind of famous, infamous painting by Courbet, which is Origin of the World.
Yeah.
Which is basically a beaver shot. But the idea is that this is a self-portrait. Okay, so because Courbet was influenced by a philosopher of the 19th century, a kind of 19th century French materialist philosopher, Ravissant, who had this concept of the absolute continuity of nature. In other words, that nature is one thing, and it's absolutely continuous. And therefore, Courbet is influenced by this, and this is a kind of literal depiction of it, that when a painter is painting, he is the painting is him. And, you know, the subject of the painting is also continuous with the painting itself and with the artist, right? So again, subject, object, medium, it's all one thing. And so here you have Courbet, a self-portrait of him painting, in which he is physically merging with the painting.
Another way to grasp the aim of the avant-garde is through the work of the Frankfurt School philosopher Theodore Adorno. He explained the aim not of avant-garde art, but of modern philosophy. For Adorno, philosophy was forced to think in a dialectical way by a society that was riven with antagonism. Under such conditions, philosophy was tasked with overcoming the antagonism by transforming society. In his book, Negative Dialectics, Adorno wrote of this task in this way, quote, "In view of the concrete possibility of utopia, dialectics is the ontology of the false condition. A right condition would be freed from dialectics. No more system than contradiction." Adorno thought that rather than seeking to dominate nature, we could overcome the contradiction between ourselves and the world without retreating into pure unconscious animality. This is Adorno's vision of reconciliation. He imagined a reconciliation between human beings and the natural world, between the individual and society, between different groups of humans in society, between all the groups of humans in society, and between the mind of man and his base, nature. But when I consider both Courbet and Adorno, I'm not left with an understanding of a definite idea, but find myself in a mood. When I try to imagine reconciliation, all I can conjure is a memory from when I was prepubescent and struggling through junior high. I specifically remember eating a part of a nutritious breakfast, specifically a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios, in December of 1983. I stared at falling snowflakes through the kitchen window and slurped milk, sweetened by cornstarch and salted by tripotassium phosphate, from my cereal bowl. Turning my attention back to the Weather Channel, I hoped that the snowfall was a sign of a blizzard. I hoped that school would be canceled due to the snow and that my torture at North Junior would be postponed for another day. What I remember most was that the main advertiser on the Weather Channel was United Airlines, and that the same 30-second spot kept repeating over and over again between the reports of 70-degree temperatures in Los Angeles, windstorms in Kansas, and the various fronts, both warm and cold, that were passing over America. The way I remember it, the United Airlines advertisement was set in the early 20th century, maybe around 1919 or 1920. It began on the Lincoln Highway, where a salesman heading to Chicago was standing next to what looked to me to be a broken-down Model T, but was probably an overheated Chevrolet Roadster. He was stuck next to a cornfield in Iowa and had to get to Chicago by noon the next day. When the salesman approached the farmhouse, he was told that, while there was no auto mechanic within walking distance, the farmer had a prop plane. The farmer could fly, and they would make it to the salesman's next destination on time. The advertisement concluded after a perfect landing in Illinois. Walking down the dirt runway towards airplane hangars, the farmer asked, "What do you think of flying?" And the salesman said, "It was great, but it would have been better if I could have had a cup of coffee during the flight." Maybe this commercial never existed, or never existed as I remember it now. When I tried just now to find it online, Bing's AI told me that there was a commercial featuring a salesman and a farmer in 1983, and that the salesman was named Bob. But this commercial also featured a farmer's daughter, and included the slogan, "United, we'll do what it takes to get you there." And when I asked the computer for a link to the video, I was sent to this strange in-house reel created by United in 1984 instead.
I want lime in my tomato juice. And a big belt of vodka wouldn't hurt.
Cut! Richard, just do the line the way it's written.
All right.
I want lime in my tomato juice, period.
All right, so I got lime in my tomato juice, period. I want more than that.
You'll get more, Richard. If you'll pay attention, you'll notice you're not
Oh, come
just
on.
flying. Remember the ticket agent? Remember the sky cap?
Oh, hi.
You're flying the friendly
You got the
skies.
touch.
Yeah, Richard. United's people, Richard. That's the difference.
Maybe I should have paid closer attention.
My attempt to comprehend Adorno's concept as something I had experienced only led me to nostalgia for a moment of alienation. When I was 13 years old, I was a profoundly unhappy kid. I hated junior high, hated my body and my life, and that year, when I was in 7th grade, I was plagued by what specialists would call suicidal ideation. My experience of reconciliation was a feeling of hope combined with comfort. I was in a warm house on a cold, snowy day, and the television provided me with images of wonder and convenience as I prayed that I would not have to attend school again. I watched this commercial over and over and enjoyed its rotation through my morning. It made me feel safe and secure and made me believe, for a moment, that life made sense and that there was such a thing as progress. Adorno's concept of reconciliation is not to be found in this memory. This feeling of peace and contentment is perhaps the only thing the memory shares with Adorno's concept. The question is whether this shared feeling is an indication that something is wrong with Adorno's idea. Is Adorno's dream of reconciliation compensatory?
Honey Nutty flavor.
Sure is one honey over now.
It's Honey Nut Cheerios.
In order to answer this question, I want to return to the call for an Avant Pop as written by Mark America. He claimed that Avant Pop would break free from the standardized and regulated culture of commercial or mass media. In this way, he was aligned with Adorno, who described mass culture as the culture of industry. In our mass culture, every movie, novel, pop song, and comic book is produced through the application of a formula. Adorno wrote that whatever differentiations, such as those of A and B films, or of stories in magazines in different price ranges, exist, depend not so much on subject matters as on classifying, organizing, and labeling consumers. However, is it not the case that reconciliation, that is, uniting of man and nature, the individual and society, promises to arrive precisely through the rational and efficient deployment of both reason and labor? Why should we object to a standardized and formulaic culture? Would a life lived through the smooth functioning of a mechanism be anything other than reconciled? If what is aimed at is the erasure of the division between the individual subject and the world, why should we object to industrialized and standardized culture? Another way to understand mass culture is to conceive of it as kitsch. The art critic Clement Greenberg, an advocate of modernism or the avant-garde, distinguished between avant-garde art, or art that was aimed at producing reconciliation in the style of Gustave Courbet, and kitsch art in his 1939 essay, Avant-Garde and Kitch. He wrote that the reason that mass culture or popular entertainment was so much more successful, so much more sought after and enjoyed than high art or avant-garde art was because kitsch art did not require education, refinement, or reflective thinking. Kitsch art, Greenberg said, relies on formulas for the mass production of art, formulas that are derived from the long history of artistic and cultural production. By reproducing the ideas and feelings already perfected in the past, by repackaging and diluting the expressions of life from other epochs, the kitsch artist creates works that require no reflection or thought but that can deliver their meaning and effect automatically. The prototypical kitsch artist Greenberg mentions in his essay is the English poet John Keats. Keats created poems wherein thinking and reflection were elements within the poems themselves. Or, as Greenberg put it in a footnote, what does Keats write about mainly, if not the effect of poetry upon himself? I'm reminded of Rick Roderick's complaint about television. He said that television critiques itself, that it does our thinking for us, and that rather than making the unconscious conscious, which he said was the aim of psychoanalysis, TV does the opposite.
If the goal of psychoanalysis is that the unreflected parts of us become reflected, that the it become the I, then the goal of a mass simulational culture, and this is a remark that I'm using from the Frankfurt School, don't worry about it, the goal of a mass telecommunication culture is psychoanalysis in reverse. It's that the little last remaining parts of that garrison become unconscious. It's precisely to reverse that process of enlightenment. Mass culture is enlightenment in reverse gear.
We're asked to be less conscious and by extension less alienated. A person who watched The Love Boat back in the 80s was invited to put aside his critical faculties and take life upon the sea as natural and right. To see the people on the boat and the culture of love on the television series as united and fully reconciled was meant to lead the viewer to feeling comfortably enmeshed in a world of romance, sex, and consumption that required no alterations. Love, life's sweetest reward, could not be criticized.
It floats back to you.
The aim of the avant-garde, then, is not to reconcile humanity to nature, but rather to free humanity from both the need to dominate nature and the condition of being dominated by nature. Instead, the avant-garde artist aims to create a world that he knows will also act back upon him. The avant-garde artist aims to create self-understanding and to take hold of an inner distance so that the world of his creation remains unfixed, just as he himself is not frozen, but capable of self-transformation. According to Wikipedia, one of the definitive avant pop musical acts was the Penguin Cafe Orchestra. Its founder, Simon Jeffs, described the process of creating music as involving a process of not thinking, but rather being. He said that his ego would get in the way of creating, and it was only when he could step aside that he could get out of his own way and create art. Jeffs described the music of the Penguin Cafe Orchestra as part of his return to classical music after having spent years studying the avant-garde. It might be thought of as a return to academic art or to kitsch, but if it was kitsch art, it was also an art that attempted to generate a new and different sort of feeling in the listener. He once described it as containing something universal, something familiar, but perhaps forgotten. In one interview, Jeffs related how, before he composed music for the Penguin Cafe, he imagined a place called the Penguin Cafe and wrote about it. The Penguin Cafe, he said, was an imaginary place, a sort of home, a place before our parents' home, where we all come from.
What do you think you're doing anyway, huh? Just what do you think? You're singing sharp. You're out of tune. You always sing like that? That's a song, Wagon Wheels, Tommy. It's a beautiful song, and it means a lot to the people. And you sing it, you follow it up like that, huh? On purpose.
That's my sound.
That's your sound.
That's my sound. That's the way I sing.
If that's your sound, I don't like your sound. I don't want to hear it anymore.
I'm going to sing.
You're not going to sing. You're going to do what I tell you. If you're going to sing like that, then you don't sing the rest of the show, okay? I'll do a song my way. We like to do it well.
Mom always liked you best.
If the Penguin Cafe Orchestra was avant pop because it fused experimental techniques with traditional melodies, and a commercially successful effort to create listenable and comforting music that produced a warm feeling, the Smothers Brothers were the opposite. Their repertoire primarily included folk standards and work songs like the Ballad of John Henry or Tom Dooley. Rather than creating a warm and secure place, a psychological state to facilitate the recognition of the strange and sublime, the Smothers Brothers were more directly subversive. The music was familiar and safe, while their commentary on the music produced laughs.
Wait a second. I heard someone not singing right over there. I wasn't watching. You mean you saw some guy not singing? No, I heard him right over there. Now wait a minute. You can't hear somebody not singing. This is a song where people are supposed to join in. I know it, but you can't hear anybody not singing. You saw the guy. No, I wasn't even looking over there, and I heard him clear as a bell. Just absolutely nothing. Tommy, you cannot hear someone not singing. You can. So I heard him. It's impossible. You have to see him. Okay. Am I singing right now? No. How do you know? Because I can't.
For example, in the late 60s, the Smothers Brothers performed the song Red River Valley on their CBS program, The Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. After singing a few bars of the song, Tommy stops playing and announces the song was no good. The problem, he says, is that music has changed since 1896. He explained that Fred Hurley caused the change. Hurley was a worker for the Kansas City Power Company, and he invented rock music while on a break from work. Fred had an acoustic guitar and liked to play between shifts. In 1946, Hurley accidentally threw himself into the electric generator while playing his guitar and electrified himself, his guitar, and the sound of the music. Hurley miraculously survived the experience and became a hitmaker. At the end of the bit, Tom and Dick Smothers replaced their acoustic instruments with electric instruments, played a few bars of Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, before returning to their performance of Red River Valley, only on their new electric instruments. But the song sounded exactly the same as before. After the interruption and diversion from Tommy, the same maudlin tune produced laughs.
Red River Valley Electric. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just remember River Valley and the cowboy who loved you so true.
The idea of reconciliation through art is self-contradictory. To reach the level of Gustave Courbet today, under the conditions of capitalism, artists and activists alike must overcome a contradiction that was not present in the 19th century. The industrialization of society, the standardization of art, the mechanistic culture that surrounds us, suppresses and subdues us as individuals, even as it creates the impression that the world produced by our cooperation and labor is objective and natural. To reach a state of reconciliation wherein individuals can connect to the world and shape it, to create art that prefigures a condition that can only be reached through revolutionary political action that transforms the basis of work, economy, and exchange, we must first embrace alienation. To bring audiences to feel the disconnect as something they are creating without debasing or shaming audiences, to point to the kind of security and solidity one needs in order to find the courage to act, whilst demystifying the reality of our collective condition, is the task of the avant-garde, pop or otherwise.